From the Tualatin Valley Community Television Studios in beautiful green Beaverton, Oregon, we bring you the Conversations with Dr. Don show. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for watching Conversations with Dr. Don. Now, for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1 hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about tonight. Well, that's my canned speech for the opening of a regular show, but this is an irregular show, or not a regular show anyhow. This is part 2 of a video memoir of a New Orleans Creole, and I'm a New Orleans Creole. About a month ago, we did part 1 of the first version of this, and my wonderful director, Steve, and the rest of the crew said, this was so interesting, we should do some more about your history as a New Orleans Creole. And here we are doing part 2. And let's see how this one goes over. I had interesting thoughts and all sorts of feelings going on as I was reviewing my history from the time I could remember until the present day, and recalling events and things that happened as a kid and so on and so forth. But we will touch on those a bit later on as we go through the show. And the switch is going to take place right now because David Delk, who is listed as a guest, is going to switch roles with me and be the interviewer, and I'm going to be the guest.
Yes, and so welcome to the show, Dr. Don.
Don't be hard on me as I am on my guest.
Oh no, I'm a very kind person, so we'll be good to you. So we want to hear your story.
You do?
Yes, we do. Right.
This feels really weird. You know that.
Right. So thank you for joining us today. Well, we start with your telling us just something about who you are. Like, start out with where you were born, when you were born.
Okay, I was born on December 26th, 1928. That was a long time ago, son.
That would be 81 years ago. Is that right? 81, 82?
81.
Okay,
82 this year.
Okay.
And I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and there is a picture of the house. There, is it up now?
There it is.
There it is, yeah.
Yep.
That isn't the house I was born in. I went back a few years ago to check, but that is right next to the house. But my house is gone when I was born in 1928, and that looks like what was going on there in the Upper Ninth Ward in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I was born. And I lived there till I was about 6 years old, and Papa died, my father died. And we moved up to the 7th Ward in New Orleans, which is a step better, which is not very much for poor working class people anyhow. But a place on Annette Street, 2022 Annette Street, and that's where you moved to.
Okay.
And
so this is the house. This is the same house.
This is the same house, yeah. And it's amazing. There's a story with that house. That house brings back so many memories. It's been upgraded some from the time I was there in the 30s, and it's now a cement porch. But in that block on that street, that's the only house that's intact and standing.
Oh.
All the other houses are gone.
Because of Katrina, or just because they're gone?
They're all gone. It was a poor working class neighborhood, and mostly Creole and black, with the white stores, combination store residences on the corners, where the proprietors of these stores were always white, and there's a lot of stories around that too. And they also lived there, and the homes are connected to the stores. And that house across the street. Oh, let's go back to the house again. That woman standing behind me there in blue, when I knocked on the door of the house a few years ago, and she opened the door, and she said, "Oh, hi, Don." Oh, she called me Donald. And I said, "You know me?" She says, "Of course I know you." Now, I hadn't seen this woman since the 40s,
Wow.
but she recognized me. And I still don't recognize her. But she said, "I used to live across the street from right over there, but the house is gone now."
Really?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
How could she recognize me?
Yeah.
But that caused a whole bunch of memories of 2022 in that street. So we lived there for a long, long time, and more later on to where I moved
Yeah.
as you move along. Now, I'll go to the side porch of this house. It brings back many memories. Now, that is a niece, but that side porch was where a lot of things went on in the summertime. That table you see there in the background is where we ate a lot in the summertime because it was hot and muggy. And those posts along the left-hand side were where the clotheslines hung from post to post to hang out the clothes that were washed on a washboard. And in front of the little kid sitting on the box, that's the edge of the porch, where I stood down there with the scrub brush and artisan soap and scrubbed the overalls to clean them.
Really? Wow.
Oh, memories.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And as I recall from our last program, you said that the water was not in the house, but was at a faucet in the middle of the backyard or something like that?
That was on Darjanwar Street.
Oh,
I forgot to mention it. We didn't have running water in the house, and we didn't have indoor plumbing, and we didn't have a bathroom, and we had a wood stove, and it was quite primitive,
Yeah.
But we were lucky. And this one we had running water.
All right, good.
And
Moving up.
moving up. Did we have a refrigerator? No, I think we still had an ice box here
Ice
on
box.
that street. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's some stories that.
Yeah.
And those posts on the left-hand side, there were, as I said, wires hung between the posts to hang up the laundry to dry. And sometimes I'd run out of the house to jump off the edge of the porch and forget the wire was there, and it would hit me right above the eyebrows. And the feet would go out. These are very pleasant memories, Rick. Don't say anything. So, anyhow, that's where I lived from the time I was born, and as a little kid in New Orleans.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned your father and work. What kind of work did he do?
Papa was a shipwright.
A shipwright. Okay.
A carpenter who worked on building boats and ships in Madisonville, Louisiana, across Lake Pontchartrain from New Orleans.
Okay.
That was Papa's work.
And your mother took care of the kids?
She took care of a lot of kids. There were 12 of them, and I was the baby. And by the time I came along in the last ones, Mama was all worn out after 12 kids. And she was kind of old when I was born anyhow. So I have some pictures of Mama and Papa.
All right. Well, let's take a look.
Show them. And here is a picture of my mother. And this was taken probably in the 40s. Yeah. She was a Heiser. Her grandfather was from a little town near Hamburg, Germany. She's about half German, and the other part is black and Native American. But there's no history of what the black is or where it came from. We just know it's there. Otherwise, we would be white and not Creole.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's how Creole comes into it.
So Creole's a mixture. Is it always a mixture?
Yeah. And New Orleans Creole is a mixture of white, which means a European white, French, German, something like that, and then red, Native American from some tribe or other, particularly around that area of Louisiana and Mississippi, and the black, which was lost someplace from the time they came from Africa, the black heritage. I guess there was a small percentage of blacks who managed to make it to America as not slaves, but through Latin America or the West Indies. But I'm not sure about the black heritage. I can only guess and presume that there's black heritage because you can see the black and the children and that's a whole other story. All my brothers and sisters are various shades of brown or tan or whatever. And I was very envious of my brother, who is 2.5 years older than me, Kenneth, because Kenneth looked more white than I did. And I was always unhappy because I thought my nose was too wide and my lips were too thick. And it was always a goal to be white, whether you owned it or not, if you were a Creole. But I mentioned there are 3 distinct cultures in New Orleans, and they're kind of funny because there was a colored at that time, and the white and the Creole.
Okay.
And I was a Creole, but then in the Creole community, there was this sort of separation, the brown bag theory, and if you were light enough, even in the Creole community, you hung out with those lighter-skinned Creoles who were almost white. But then when the Creoles married other Creoles, they tried to marry someone who was lighter than they were, because in the succeeding generations, if you were light enough and you didn't have any black heritage you're aware of, then you could become white.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There's a theory that if every white Louisianian were to claim back any black heritage, there'd be very few pure white people in Louisiana, because those parts are mixed up. There are a lot of wood cows, as we say back there.
Okay, all right.
So let me continue on. And we had Mama, and there's the old man. I think that was probably taken in early 30s, 1930 or so. Papa, there was a tear in that picture. I didn't get it fixed up. But there's the old man with his newspaper, Papa. I remember him because I was real small when he died. And he'd be coming home from work, and I'd go out to meet him. And there were no sidewalks or anything out there, you know. And all I remember is this big finger and this huge man that hung on the Papa's hand. And my sisters, Papa was very protective of his family, and particularly his 7 daughters. He wanted to be sure that the men that his daughters hooked up with were Creole enough and were straight arrow, because Papa was pretty strict. But I don't remember Papa being strict. I remember this gentle, kind, soft-spoken old man. And I can almost hear his voice and know what he was saying. I'd hang on to his finger, and we'd walk to the gate and come inside, and Mama would prepare dinner for us.
So maybe there was a double standard?
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. The boys were treated differently than the girls, apparently.
Yeah, sure sounds like it.
In those days, there was a lot of chauvinism going on, apparently.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
So there's Papa.
Great. Good, all right.
And we have another shot of, that's Mama with a bunch of nieces and nephews. All nephews there, the 3 in the bottom, and the 2 at the top above Mama's head. Guess which one is me?
Oh, the tall one in the
No, that's Kenneth, that looked like a white boy. The
tall
one with the shiny forehead, that's me with a big square German head. And I wasn't really that dark then, but at those times, they had a very primitive version of Kodak, all black and white, very few shades of gray in between. That was Mama on the front porch on Annette Street.
Right. Okay.
Good memories there. And then my 11 brothers and sisters, let me show you those slides. There is that's one of Papa. Mama, Pacha, one of Papa. Let's see, what was that? Front porch. And then Papa with me on Papa's knee. You see me with my little bow leggies there and curly hair. And to Papa's left is Kenneth, a little white boy, and Ruby, and then Mama sitting in the background. But that's not a cigarette in her mouth. Mama didn't smoke anything like that, didn't drink. I think Mama was a saint. She was very Catholic, and she spent all of her life praying. She had a prayer book at her side or her rosary. And during Lent, my knees had calluses from doing the rosary and praying a lot. A very strict Roman Catholic family. That's another story.
Right. And was your father that That Catholic also?
I'm not remembering whether he was or not. But usually in those families, the husbands or the fathers went along with what Mama dictated as far as the religious, following the dictates of the religion are concerned, yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
there's Wilna. That's the only other remaining Baham child left. She's 96 now, and she's in a home in Playa del Rey in LA and Southern California. And we put her in hospice here about 3 or 4 months ago. But she doesn't want to go. And I talk to her about once a week. And she's lucid, her thinking is slow, she's pleasant, and she's just okay.
Great, yeah.
But she doesn't walk anymore. She gets up in a chair now and then.
And she's 96
6.
years old. Wow.
An interesting story about Wilna. When I came out of the Army in 1950, instead of going back to New Orleans where I joined the Army, I went to LA where Wilna and her husband Jim were. And Jim was in World War II, and I was in the occupation in Japan in World War II. So when I came back to the States, Jim, I think, presumed that I had seen combat or something, because he says, "Okay, son, here's the keys to the second car. You don't do a work or anything for 6 months. You have got to relax and unwind." Of course, I hated that.
And you didn't tell him.
Jim was the kindest man. Jim was nicer to me than any of my biological brothers were.
Right.
So let me continue with the family and see what else we have here. And that's Ulysses, who passed about 8 years ago. He was the oldest boy.
And how old was he?
He was 91 or so. They were all
Most of
long-lived.
them long-lived, huh? Right, great.
Yeah, and I must say that I resolved any unfinished issues with my older brothers and sisters all before they passed, thank goodness. But it occurs to me right now, sometimes I was mad at some of them or a few of them, and it wasn't until later that we resolved things, so to speak. And I was mad at Ulysses because he was even more self-centered than I was. I'd go down to LA, and the first, as a ritual, being the oldest one, this was years ago, I'd stop and visit him first, Pat, my wife, and I. And I'd come in the door and he says, "Oh, how are you? How was your trip?" And that was the last question he had about me. Then he started talking about himself. And I said to him, "I honor you by showing up here about every 6 months, and you're the first one I see because you're the oldest brother, but you have no concern about me whatsoever." And it really makes me mad as hell. Don't you mean it when you say, "How are you? How was your trip?" And then I let it all out at him. And then I went over and I grabbed him and I hugged him. Well, he never hugged. He was like a rock. And he did this little embarrassed grin. Ha, ha, ha.
What are you doing?
I finally got him to crack. And he relaxed a little bit and relaxed his tension. And that was such a good feeling. And we talked a little while after that about how he doesn't really pay attention to me. So he went a little bit, but I forgave him.
Yeah, right.
Stories about Ulysses, yeah. And there is Pearl and Ruby to my right and left. Pearl, the one to my right, was caught in Katrina. She was the last of the children who was in Katrina at the time. And she was always very, very fragile in those years. And she managed to move 3 times. As the water was rising, they moved her up to the next place where it wasn't there yet. And we thought for sure she would die in these moves because she was so fragile with the heart and all that kind of stuff. And she made it out to Waco, Texas, her final move. And a year later she died.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Ruby, to my left there, she died about 5 years ago. And next to Ruby is Donna, my baby daughter, my spoiled brat.
Yeah, I've met her, right.
Yeah, and then to the left of Donna is Sandra, which is Pearl's daughter. Sandra is still in Waco, Texas, and she's a delight, a sweetheart. Yeah. Let's see, who else do we have here? Oops. There's Kenneth.
Okay.
the white boy. Kenneth was a bum.
Oh.
Rest his soul. But we resolved our stuff. As we were kids, Kenneth was just 2.5 years older than me. And if there was something going on goofy in the house, it was always a presumption that it was me rather than Kenneth. And I'd have the evidence right clear that it was Kenneth's fault. But Mama would try to be peaceful about it, but I knew she believed Kenneth's story over me, and I was hey, turn it on, really mad at him. But see, he looked like he was in the Navy, and Wilbur was in the Marines, and Ulysses was in the Navy, and I tried to join the Marines first because that was the most prestigious. This was in '46, and they wouldn't take me. Then I tried the Navy, and they wouldn't take me. And finally, reluctantly, I volunteered for the Army. But that's another story.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll talk about that a little later on. Yeah. Okay. Good.
And there's Junior and his wife.
Okay.
And Junior is a nephew. He's my oldest brother's oldest boy. And Junior was a year older than me, and he was more like a brother to me, and we were sort of opposite in our physical development. He matured earlier, and I was a late maturer physically. So if there was any difficulty with any of the kids in the neighborhood, Junior stepped in and took care of me.
All right, that's always good to have.
Yeah. And right now he's in a home in New Orleans, and he's kind of in and out, and he's fading, but I love him.
Yeah.
And his wife is delightful. So who else do we have coming up here? And there was Jim and Wilna, my sister. This was many years ago. Jim was so kind to me.
Okay, and Jim is one of your brothers also?
No, he's Wilna's husband.
Oh, okay.
Wilna's husband. And Jim, following the Creole theme of the show, Jim was from Oklahoma. And he's a whole bunch of brothers. They all look varying degrees of white, even though they weren't born in New Orleans or Louisiana. So I think Wilna's first husband was George Prudhoe, who looked white also. She had the bug to marry more white than her, like so many Creoles do. But she and George divorced, and then she found Jim. And this couple were just fabulous. She had furs, and they owned a lot of property and had a real good time with their lives. Yeah, but Jim was so good to me. That's why I remember him. And let's see who else we have here. And Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
That's where I did my first communion and was confirmed during my Catholic days. And I remember those not too fondly. And somewhat fondly too,
Yeah. So how long would you say you were Catholic, and then you moved on from?
I was Catholic nominally. I was very strict Catholic till I was about 15 when Mama died, and then I had an affiliation with the local Catholic church. I can't think of the name right now, and I was an altar boy there for some time. And did a lot of work and was associated because Father Ty, Irish priest, very Irish, is Irish brogue, and I attached to him. I think I replaced my mother with Father Ty because he was so kind to me for some time until I grew out of that stage. But where was it? So I was Catholic until after I left St. Raymond's and moved up to Annette Street. No, Antioch, I'm out of order. So I was nominally Catholic, but only went to services on Sundays or now when the family thought I should go. But then I married Catholic, and then after my first divorce, there's so many things happened that didn't fit with the Catholic doctrine and Catholic teachings. And I thought, what's going on here? Now you can meet on Friday, and a few other things like that. So I never really embraced fully the Catholic dictates.
Yeah.
So when I had a divorce and I couldn't receive the sacraments anymore, I said, that's it.
Yeah.
I've had it.
Yeah.
So I was irreligious for quite some time and embraced Unitarianism to some degree. And you know, Unitarians have varying degrees of recognition of the Trinity and the hereafter in God. And then, oh heavens, some 20 years ago, I think I became a humanist. I evolved. And I'm still open to change. I keep growing and decide something different. It's an important thing to consider as a humanist, that I'm obliged to be open to whatever occurs to me to seem reasonable or fit.
Okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
So my background, just off topic here
No,
just
we
a little
can't
bit,
talk
but
about
no, actually, I really shouldn't because I'm diverting. But
No,
somewhat,
please do.
my mother was Catholic also. She had divorced, so she disassociated from the church. So when I grew up, while she was Catholic, nominally, I never went to church. She never asked me to go to church, and I thought that was a blessing. And then I became a Unitarian. So my next step would be to become a humanist then.
Yeah, we're waiting for you.
We'll see what happens.
Are you an atheist or an atheist?
I don't know. Would best summarize.
Agnostic?
Yes, right, yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah, someday we'll find out.
I couldn't switch on that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I make a distinction between being an atheist or an atheist. When someone asks me, well, are you an atheist? I'll say, no, I'm not an atheist, I'm an atheist. There's a difference. Atheist is a pejorative. Atheist meaning I don't know about God. I don't have a God.
Okay.
But anyhow.
Yeah. So, I was curious because you say Louisiana Creole. So, are there Creoles other than Louisiana? Or in my mind, Creoles have always been in Louisiana in the New Orleans area, but I'm probably wrong on that.
There's a Creole community in Natchitoches, Louisiana. That's more like in northwest Louisiana. And there was a conference there, some years ago that I attended, and I videoed it, and I broadcast it, and Cane River Creoles. So it seems there are two major starting points for the Creole gatherings or subcultures. One is in this in Natchitoches, Cane River area, and the other is in New Orleans and its environs. So those are the Louisiana Creoles.
Okay.
Now there are racial mixtures in other parts of the world, and they're even called Creoles. But you need to make a distinction between Louisiana Creole and Creole, meaning a racial mixture in some place in Africa or in South America like that. So we're different. We're unique.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. Well, I noticed that the husband of, was it Wilma?
Wilna, N-A.
Wilna was from Oklahoma, and you said the brothers, the family was various colorings.
Yeah, shades.
Right. Shades. Right. Shades. And so I thought, were they Creoles also, or not?
All the offspring of Creole, yeah.
Offspring,
Yeah,
right, yes.
they have to be because of their racial heritage.
Right, right.
And she met Jim in Los Angeles because she moved to L.A. in the early 40s. And interesting, I thought the family didn't care for me at all, or like me at all. And then I found that, I know it's about break time. And then I have a letter there, a correspondence between Mama and Wilna, that Wilna was planning to have Mama and I move to L.A. But I felt like a fish out of water in New Orleans. I knew there was no place to go being a tradesman or a hod carrier or a carpenter like that. I had greater aspirations than that. And it was so heartening to know that somebody wanted me. But that's another story.
Okay, yeah, okay. So you have a definition of a Louisiana Creole. Do you want to do that now, or you want to wait till after the break?
No, let's wait till after the break.
Okay,
And I
all
will
right.
find it during the break. But let me get to what I've got to say before the break here. All righty, get ready, and it's time for a break now for about 4 minutes. Tell your friends to watch my shows on the internet anytime by going to my website, www.donbaham.com. Did you write that down yet? And click on favorite links. There's about 50 or 60 shows on there, older ones you can watch and see what I've done with other guests. Now, let's take that break. Okay, we're back. Thank you for staying tuned. For you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about what we decided to talk about that we thought might be of interest to you. And I just did that as a formality because David is interviewing me. So shall we pick up where we left off before?
Yeah.
I find there was some other material I was supposed to have with me that I didn't bring. I was going to talk to you about a definition of Louisiana Creole that I wrote for a family reunion occurring next month in Madisonville, Louisiana. Right, it's right across Lake Pontchartrain from New Orleans, just north of New Orleans. And the family's getting together, and it's the first time this extended family is getting together that I know of. So I had written my definition of Louisiana Creole for them because the definition that I got on the website, I wasn't very happy with. But I didn't bring it.
Okay, all right, well, we're going to do another show, so bring it next time.
Another one?
All right.
Okay. So anyhow, I want to show you some pictures of me as I grew older. Now, here I am in the side yard of 2022 in that street. And those are my cousins behind me, and I'm doing something in the yard. I must be.
So you're kneeling there in the front there.
Kneeling down in front.
Right.
In front there, yeah. And there is. Though these are backwards. This is when I was younger, and the one dog I had in my life, Rocky. I was younger than the slide you saw a minute ago.
Okay.
And those are all nephews and nieces gathered around that chair. And they all look so dark, but they're all lighter skinned, as I said before, about black and white pictures in those days. But that's me again with my little dog. And you see that square head with the light shining on it? And there I am in 1950 with Richard Randolph, who lived across the street from me in L.A. And Richard and I became fast friends. He's not from Louisiana. I think they were from Oklahoma or someplace like that. But anyhow, Richard had straight hair, and he was fair-skinned enough, and he looked like a Creole. So I must confess my own prejudices through the years. I tended to graduate to just Creole people or Creole-looking people or white people, and I felt uncomfortable. I'm embarrassed to say, in all black or all colored or all Negro crowds. And I think the reasons for that is there's an economic or a class difference and a race difference involved too. As a kid, if I spoke lousy English, I always have a Creole accent. But the colored or Negroes then really spoke bad. I think that's when Ebonics was invented, I guess, back then when I was a kid. And they'd come down on me like heck if I spoke like those little colored kids.
Your parents did?
My parents and my sisters and my brothers and like that. But anyhow, Richard was my good buddy for many years. And we double dated and we married the same girls and lived next door to each other.
Oh, cool. And so you were about how old there?
I was 21.
21, okay.
This was taken in 1951, as a matter of fact. There it is on the slide. And Richard died 3 years ago. It's awful when you get to be as old as I am. Darn everybody that your peers are all gone.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go ahead and admit it, David, so keep an eye on you.
Okay. You're going to be all right. You're going to make it through this hour.
And what do we have next? There's me with a black mustache.
Yeah.
That was some years later. That must have been, about 20 years ago. Let's see what else we have here. And that's even more recent. And the opening shot was taken just a few days ago with the opening of the show with. But that just shows you my evolution and how I looked as the years went by. All right. That's the latest one. That was taken last week. That's a self-portrait. And I sent this to my surgeon. I had gut surgery here about 16 months ago where they cut out most of over half of my small intestine because it had wrapped around itself and died, and I darn near died. And there's a whole other story about that and how I looked at life from here on out. But my surgeon and I have managed to stay in touch a little bit. She's so terribly busy. She does a lot of volunteer work around the world, doing medical help in Haiti and places like that. So we were planning to meet, at least visit for a bit. So she hadn't gotten around to it. So I took a picture. And I said, here's what your surgery has done to me.
Yes, right.
It's all your fault.
Yeah, it looks like she should be quite proud.
But I haven't heard back from her yet. If you look down at the bottom, you can see the trace of that little vertical scar. I'm sure the viewers are interested in that.
Right under your hand there, right? Yes. Okay, great.
Yeah, so that was the most recent. Now, what do we have next? That's my first wife. That's Juanita. And Maurice was her last name. She's the mother of my 5 daughters. And she's still down in the LA area. And she had remarried, but she's not married anymore. And I still love her and think back of all the many years in the 50s and thereabouts when we had a life together. And went to Mass every Sunday and Easter. And let me continue on here.
So she was Catholic also then?
There we are.
Right.
There's a backyard
whole group.
in LA, typical Easter Sunday morning, and all the daughters, all 5 of them, and Juanita and I. Yeah, what do we have next here? And there's my present wife, Pat. Isn't she lovely?
Yes. And how long have you both been married now?
We've been together about 19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Very good.
And I used to have fun doing photographs, doing portraits. And I took these.
Oh, you took these. These are very good.
Yeah. And right now, she's flying back from Kansas City because she has one biological son and one biological granddaughter. And about 4 times a year, she goes back and spends time with the granddaughter. But she missed her flight, so she'll be coming in tomorrow morning instead. But anyhow, she's flying on the way back right now. I'll pick her up tomorrow morning from the airport from PDX.
All right.
there she is. I got to sweat out of her. Hi, boo-boo. She'll be embarrassed to see I've got so many pictures of her on this show, but I won't be.
Right. And you have grandchildren yourself from your 5 daughters?
Yeah, from the first marriage.
Uh-huh.
I think the last count we had 16. And don't ask me to count great-grandchildren.
Okay. All right.
Pretty soon,
there's quite a few, though, huh?
Having some great-great-grandchildren.
Right.
I don't know if I want to live that long, David.
Well, if I do, I know I won't have any grandchildren. Not having any children, so.
Let me continue on with the slide
Yeah,
presentation here. We have next. We're on a cruise, and there is Mel Davis and his wife to his left, Dolphin. She passed away about 7 years ago. There's Pat. And Mel, interesting story. I'm so embarrassed remembering how I am racially. Putting all this together has reminded myself racially.
It's obviously a very conscious kind of thing. Yeah.
There was a presentation by some outfit where doctors were invited to attend. I'm a doctor of psychology. And even non-medical doctors were invited to attend as a presentation for continuing education. And across the room at this presentation was this one guy who happened to look my way, and it was Mel. And I looked over at him, and I says, "Who is that? What is it?" And he was doing the same thing with me. And then at break time, we introduced each other. It turns out he's a retired colonel in the Air Force. And we hit it off. And even though he's from Carolina, he's a Geechee, racial mixture, but we hit it off because of whatever. So we became fast friends. And they live in Riverside, California, which wasn't too far from LA at the time. And we became, and he took pharmacy training. He became a pharmacist for Kaiser. So he has 2 retirements. And he's still in Riverside, and we talk pretty often. When I go down, I go over and pull his chain. And his primary concern in life is economic issues, and I'm a social, and we fight back and forth. Anyhow, that's a whole other story.
So he's more on the conservative side?
Nosy, yeah.
You love that.
How can that be? It looks so Creole. They have Creoles who are conservative too, authentic Creoles. So who else do we have here? There I am with my 5 daughters. This was at my 80th birthday party. And
a couple years ago.
Down a couple years ago at Valerie's house. I was so proud of them. And who do you have next? There's Brenda, the middle one, and Valerie, the third one, I think. And there's Brenda and Daryl, who's back in Pennsylvania right now. And she moved back there with a husband and there's Donna, the brat.
Is she the youngest of your daughters?
She's the baby, yeah.
Yes.
Donna was the baby, so her sisters and her mom and I spoiled her being the baby. And she thinks, even today, that, no, I'm not going to go there. I love her. She's in Romania now. Our present husband is Romanian, and they go back to Norway, Romania, a couple of times a year. It's interesting how this generation is so different. When I was a kid, if I could afford to go across the lake to Lake Pontchartrain on a vacation, that was a reward instead of traveling to some European country.
Yes.
My gosh.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit younger than you are. That would be my reward. Would just be able to travel across town because we didn't have any money to go any farther than that. Yeah, I understand that one.
Let's see what else we have here. No, we're looking at now my work and retirement life on page 2.
All right.
My first job and working was $2.50 a week as a delivery boy. And I got to work in aircraft eventually as an aircraft mechanic, a design engineer, a technical writer, editor, and a clinical psychologist when I finally went back to school. And my schooling is so goofy. When I finally took my doctorate in clinical psychology, I think I had 3,000 units toward a specific college degree. I kept changing majors. And I went to school later in life after I was married and had children. I dropped out of junior high school. I think I mentioned that before, because I was so depressed and things were so awful and it felt so awkward because we went to school in New Orleans with there was white and colored schools, and the Creoles and Negroes all went to the same school. So our economic plight, how poor we were, the depression, and after that, and the racial mixturing in school was not very encouraging. So I dropped out of high school and ditched a lot. And finally, I took my GED when I was working in aircraft, and moved up through the ranks, and decided to finally go back to school and become a psychologist. Took a new bachelor's in psychology and master's in clinical psychology and a PhD. And that was, 25 years ago or so.
And where did you do that?
In San Diego.
In San Diego, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But
and then somewhere between that high school, dropping out of high school and going back to school, you went into the Army?
yeah, we missed that part.
Yeah.
I went into the Army. I volunteered for the Army because I had to get out of New Orleans. I don't know what the future held or where things are going, but it was just so depressing. And that's how I got away. I guess nowadays so many people in the military are in the military to get away from the life they had in civilian life.
Right, yeah.
And they have a future for themselves. They had the benefit of the GI Bill as a World War II vet. I was in the occupation of Japan for 27 months in Yokohama, and that was an excellent duty. Awakening to a whole new world, a whole new way of looking at life. And as I said, I got discharged from the Army in January 1950 and went to LA to live with Wilnie and Jim. And from there, I started back to junior college, and life went on, and met my first wife. And it all went on from there, and you've seen the results of that marriage, the 5 beautiful daughters, and they're doing fine nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
So my retirement life, I do this show. I spend a lot of time researching it, depending on my guests as to how complex they are and how much research I've got to do to figure out how to ask them questions or whatever. And you, one look, I didn't have to do much research on you. I knew what to ask you when you were a guest. I had a piece about the Creole Heritage Celebration, the opening remarks, and I didn't bring that with me. But in my acting, modeling career, in addition to my TV show that you're seeing now, I've been doing acting and modeling in recent years. And I was with the Tiger's Heart Shakespeare Company, and I did 4 productions there. That company's defunct now in Portland, and I enjoyed doing Shakespeare work. And then I was with the Hillsborough Actors Repertory Theater Company, and that's the slide that we had up last. I was doing, you can put that up now, Driving Miss Daisy, and I played Hoke. And there's Miss Daisy in the front there, the British actress who was very, very good. And her son is behind her. Well, what was fun about doing that at the very end, if you remember Driving Miss Daisy with Morgan Freeman, incidentally, Morgan Freeman was almost as good as I was as Hoke.
Oh, I'm sure not. I'm sure that's not true.
But at the end, I think Coralie was even a little older than I was as far as memory is concerned. And if you remember, the last scene is very dramatic and very powerful. And the lines need to be just right with the emotion involved, because this is a... But Coralie would forget her lines, and I don't know what she'd give me, and I'd have to keep the dynamic going. So there was a lot of improv in Driving Miss Daisy. Well, that was so delightful. And then in my modeling career, and just as a matter of fact, last week I did a modeling job for a company that produces medical instruments for hospitals and those kinds of institutions. And for 2 days, I was cast as a heart patient. So the first day we shot for 10 hours, and the second day for about 4 or 5 hours. And the whole time I was in bed with all kind of tubes in my nose and my ears at various stages of recovery from heart surgery. So during a break when they were changing film or some cameras, I'd throw off the drug and show my arms. I'm not really sick. But they had a good time with it. So that's some of my modeling. But here's an example of a few of more of my modeling jobs. Oh, this is another Hillsborough. I played in St. John. I played the Archbishop, and I enjoyed that role very much. Incidentally, for Hillsborough Actors Repertory Theater, being a humanist, I was cast for 3 productions in a row where I was a man of the cloth.
Oh, really?
Another one I was a preacher, and another one I was another archbishop or something. I don't know what that's saying to me, but I'm not going back there or not.
Done that already, huh?
So here's another shot of my modeling career. I was a coach. This is at Catlin Gable.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the shots that they took there. And another one, this is a trip. Modeling is quite interesting. I'm not sure how curious you are about it because I made good money for that top dollar for modeling. And they only wanted one part of me. My hand. They took 1,000 pictures of my hand and the caretaker holding my hand. The object was to show that we care about our patients. And says, don't you want my face or at least my foot? No, just your hand. Modeling is such fun.
So you were...
And there's the 80th birthday party. The whole gang, my friends from years ago, and I could go on talking about those people.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just get you off script for a minute.
Yeah.
I know that something that you have done. I think you've done it a couple of times. You've gone down to the Oregon legislature, and what'd you do there?
Oh yeah, I had planned to bring those as a humanist minister. The Oregon House or Senate has an opening invocation, and they invite some person of the cloth to come in and open the session with an invocation to inspire them to do the good work that they do down there. And I met the governor quite by accident, but anyhow, I've been down there about 6 or 7 times over the years, and but invocation goes anywhere from 3 to even 5.5 minutes. And I put a lot of work and effort into doing that to encourage these people to do the citizens' work. And I'm embarrassed I didn't bring that with me either. But anyhow, that was...
Those were very good.
I'm still doing those.
Good.
So I've gotten the high sign that it's about time for us to get ready to close.
We need at least another hour before we do the next hour. So I think we're going to probably go to about 5-hour sessions here.
No, we're going to do a session that has to do with awareness of racial differences and experiences in part 3 of this particular show, a video memoir of a New Orleans Creole. But it's time for us to stop. So keep your pens and pencils handy because you may want to jot down something that we'll show you in the closing credits. Thanks for watching. I invite you to give us feedback, both positive and negative, about any aspect of the show, and I mean it. It helps us to give you a better show. A few public service announcements that are important for me. The Alliance for Democracy, an organization I belong to. There's the national website, and let's put up the panel for the Portland chapter, which David Delk called and talked to David about coming to our meetings and being involved in citizen activism. And let's talk about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. I've been a member of the ACLU for ages and ages. Thank goodness for the ACLU. And I think there's something that's going on now where they've taken a position that I'm not too happy with. But overall, thank goodness for the ACLU. The ACLU hotline, If you think that you or someone that you know have been stopped for not a good reason, and the ACLU wants to know about it, there's sometimes law enforcement is a little over eager and they'll stop someone for how they look. So we're interested in curbing racial profiling. I'm not anti-law enforcement by any stretch of the imagination. Thank goodness for our police department that protect us from people like you. No. There's a phone number for the racial profiling hotline, and Rick. With the humanists, the American Humanist Association, I'm a humanist, and that's a great organization for those who are not particularly involved with organized religion. Become a humanist. Go to that website. Humanists have a Portland chapter. Humanists of Greater Portland, it's called. There's the website, and there is the phone number to call. And Sunday morning programs. We have Sunday morning programs like regular church folk. And July 4th, that Sunday morning, we're going to have an early bird discussion, a main program, and a main program alternate. Sorry, we don't have much time to show more than that. Let's put up the next one for Sunday morning programs. Achieving a Vision, Roy Speckhart for the main program is the president of our organization. Anyhow, that's what's going to go on there. Okay, it's time to say goodnight. I got to give you my final thought. KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you. Thanks.